Imagine sitting in an airplane seat, looking around, and realizing that every single person next to you is completely still. Not moving, not breathing, not blinking. Dead. Now imagine that this airplane keeps flying on autopilot, cruising through the blue European sky while 121 corpses remain strapped to their seats. The pilots? Dead in the cockpit. The flight attendants collapsed in the aisles. Everyone unconscious, everyone suffocating, everyone dying at 34,000 feet while the engines hum peacefully and the plane flies perfectly straight toward its destination. This isn't a horror movie. This isn't fiction teaser. August 14th, 2005. Helios Airways Flight 522. A Boeing 737 that became a flying tomb. A ghost ship in the sky that Greek fighter jets only to discover something so disturbing that the pilots radioed back to ground control in complete shock. They could see inside the cockpit. They could see the captain slumped over. They could see the first officer motionless, and then they saw something that made absolutely no sense. Someone was still alive. Someone was moving inside that cockpit, but it wasn't a pilot. The day started like any other day at Larnaca International Airport in Cyprus. Early morning, blue skies, tourists heading to Athens for vacations, business travelers checking their watches, families with kids. Nothing unusual. Flight 522 was scheduled to depart at 9 in the morning, stop briefly in Athens to drop off passengers, then continue to Prague, a routine milk run that Helios Airways operated several times a week. The Boeing 737 had been in service for years. Well-maintained. Reliable. The crew was experienced. Captain Hans-Jürgen Merten, a German pilot with thousands of flight hours. First Officer Pompos Saralambos, a Cypriot aviator who knew these routes like the back of his hand. For flight attendants, all trained professionals. Everything checked out. Everything looked normal. But something was already wrong. Terribly wrong. And nobody noticed. The night before the flight, maintenance engineers had performed a routine pressure test on the aircraft. Standard procedure. They switched the pressurization system to manual mode to run diagnostics, checking for leaks in the fuselage. The test went fine. No leaks detected. Aircraft cleared for flight. But here's the thing. After the test was completed, someone forgot to switch the pressurization system back to automatic mode. That switch, a small lever in the cockpit, remained in the manual position. One tiny oversight, one forgotten step, and it was about to kill everyone on board. At 9-0-7 in the morning, Flight 522 pushed back from the gate. Passengers settled into their seats. Flight attendants did their safety demonstrations. The pilots ran through their pre-flight checklist. Everything seemed perfect. The Boeing taxied to the runway, engines roaring to life, and at night, the aircraft lifted off into the Mediterranean sky. Climb rate normal, speed normal. The plane turned northwest toward Athens, but as the aircraft climbed higher and higher, passing through 10,000 feet, then 15,000, then 20,000, something catastrophic was happening. The cabin wasn't pressurizing at all. The air inside the fuselage was getting thinner and thinner with every passing second. Oxygen levels dropping, and nobody realized it yet. At around 10,000 feet, the human body starts to feel the effects of low oxygen. Confusion, dizziness, slower reactions. By 18,000 feet, you're experiencing hypoxia. Your brain isn't getting enough oxygen to function properly. You feel drunk. You can't think straight. You make mistakes. And by 30,000 feet, if you're not wearing an oxygen mask, you have about 30 to 60 seconds of useful consciousness before you pass out completely. The pilots of Flight 522 climbed to 34,000 feet, and they had no idea they were suffocating. At 9:20, just 11 minutes into the flight, the pilots noticed something wrong. A warning light, the takeoff configuration warning. It was blaring in the cockpit, but this warning didn't make sense. The takeoff configuration warning only activates during takeoff if something is wrong with the flaps or slats. but they were already in the air, already climbing. Why was this alarm going off now? The pilots were confused. They radioed back to Helios maintenance. They described the warning. Maintenance told them it was probably a minor technical glitch, nothing to worry about. Keep flying? But the warning wasn't a glitch. It was the plane screaming at them. That same warning horn is also used for cabin altitude warnings. The plane was trying to tell them that the cabin pressure was dangerously low. But the pilots, already suffering from early-stage hypoxia, couldn't connect the dots. Their brains were slowing down. Their judgment was impaired, and they kept climbing. At 9:30, the passenger oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Panic erupted in the cabin. Parents grabbed their children. People fumbled with the yellow masks, pulling them over their faces. The flight attendants tried to calm everyone down, but they were just as confused as the passengers. Why would the masks deploy on a normal flight? What was happening? One of the flight attendants, Andreas Prodromou, was a trained commercial pilot himself. He had his pilot's license. He immediately suspected something was critically wrong. He picked up the intercom and called the cockpit. No answer? He tried again. Still no answer. He walked toward the front of the plane, toward the cockpit door. But before he could reach it, he started feeling dizzy, lightheaded. His vision blurred. The cabin was at 34,000 feet altitude equivalent. The oxygen masks that dropped were designed to last only 12 to 15 minutes. Enough time for pilots to descend the aircraft to a safe altitude where people can breathe normally. But the pilots weren't descending. They were still flying straight and level at 34,000 feet. And now, they weren't responding to anyone. At 9-30-7, Greek Air Traffic Control tried to contact Flight 522. No response. They tried again. Silence. They tried emergency frequencies. Nothing. The plane was still flying, still on course, but nobody was answering. Greek authorities scrambled to F-16 fighter jets to intercept the Boeing. At 10:30, the fighter jets pulled alongside Flight 522. The pilots looked into the cockpit windows. What they saw made their blood run cold. The captain was slumped over the controls, motionless. The first officer was sitting in his seat, head tilted back, completely still. Both pilots were unconscious or dead. The fighter pilots radioed back to command. They reported what they saw. 2 unresponsive pilots, a ghost plane flying on autopilot. Greek authorities didn't know what to do. Should they shoot it down? It was heading toward Athens, toward a densely populated city. If this plane crashed into Athens, it could kill hundreds, maybe thousands of people on the ground. But how do you shoot down a civilian airliner full of passengers? How do you make that call? And then, one of the fighter pilots saw something that changed everything. Movement inside the cockpit. Someone was moving. Someone was alive. A figure appeared in the cockpit doorway. A man in a blue shirt. He stumbled into the cockpit, grabbed the captain's seat, and looked out the window. He saw the fighter jets. He waved. The fighter pilot radioed immediately. Someone was still conscious. Someone was trying to take control. That man was Andreas Prodromou, the flight attendant with a pilot's license. He had found a portable oxygen bottle, the kind flight attendants use in emergencies. It gave him just enough oxygen to stay conscious a little longer than everyone else. He fought through the hypoxia, stumbled through a cabin full of dead and dying passengers, and made it to the cockpit. He saw the 2 pilots, both unconscious. He tried to shake them. No response. He looked at the instrument panel. Fuel gauges, almost empty. The plane had been flying for nearly 2 hours. It was running out of gas. Andreas knew what was about to happen. He grabbed the radio. He tried to call for help, but his words were slurred. Confused, the hypoxia was overwhelming him. He couldn't form coherent sentences. The fighter pilots could hear him trying to speak, but they couldn't understand him. And then the engines stopped. At 11-40-9, 2 hours and 40 minutes after takeoff, the Boeing 737 ran out of fuel. Both engines flamed out. The plane started descending. Fast Andreas was still in the cockpit, still holding the radio, still trying to control the aircraft. but he was dying. His brain was shutting down. He had maybe seconds of consciousness left. The fighter pilots watched in horror as the Boeing began to spiral downward. They followed it down, hoping for a miracle, hoping Andreas could somehow pull off an emergency landing, but he couldn't. At 11:50, the Boeing 737 slammed into a hillside near the Greek village of Grammatico, 25 miles north of Athens. The impact was catastrophic. The plane disintegrated on contact. Wreckage scattered across the mountainside. Fire erupted. 121 people were on board. All of them were already dead before the crash. Every passenger, every crew member. They had all suffocated hours earlier. Andreas Prodromou, the flight attendant who fought to the very end, died on impact. He was the last person alive on that plane, and he almost saved it. The investigation that followed was one of the most disturbing in aviation history. Investigators combed through the wreckage. They recovered the black boxers. They listened to the cockpit voice recorder. What they heard was chilling. At the beginning of the flight, you could hear the pilots talking normally, routine communications. Then, gradually, their voices started slowing down. Words became slurred. Responses delayed. They sounded drunk. At one point, the first officer radioed Athens control and said the air conditioning system wasn't working, but he didn't say anything about cabin pressure. He didn't mention that they were suffocating because he didn't realize it. His brain was too oxygen deprived to understand what was happening to him. And then the cockpit voice recorder went silent. The pilots stopped talking, stopped responding. Just the sound of alarms blaring, the warning horn screaming. And then, nothing. Hours of nothing. Just the sound of the engines. The autopilot flying the plane. And then, at the very end, you can hear Andreas Prodromou entering the cockpit. You can hear him breathing heavily, gasping, trying to speak. And then, the engines quit. The recording ends. The investigation revealed the horrifying truth. The pressurization switch was still in manual mode from the night before, from the maintenance test. Nobody checked it. The pilots missed it during their pre-flight checks, and because of that one tiny oversight, everyone on board was sentenced to death. The plane climbed to 34,000 feet. The cabin never pressurized. The oxygen levels dropped. The pilots became hypoxic. They couldn't think clearly. They misinterpreted the warning alarms. They never descended. They never put on their oxygen masks. They just kept flying, getting more and more disoriented, until they finally lost consciousness completely. The passengers, they had the emergency oxygen masks, but those only last 12 to 15 minutes. After that, they suffocated too. Slowly, painfully, one by one. Children, families, everyone. And the plane just kept flying. A perfect autopilot flight path. Engines running smoothly. Everything functioning perfectly, except everyone inside was dead. Greek authorities faced an impossible question. Why didn't the pilots realize what was happening? These were experienced professionals. They should have recognized hypoxia. They should have descended immediately. But hypoxia is insidious. It doesn't feel like suffocating. You don't gasp for air. You just feel tired, confused, a little drunk. Your brain shuts down so gradually that you don't realize you're dying. Pilots are trained to recognize hypoxia, but when you're experiencing it, your judgment is the first thing to go. You can't think straight. You make irrational decisions. You ignore warning signs, and by the time you realize something is wrong, it's too late. You're unconscious. The Helios crash exposed a terrifying vulnerability in aviation. One forgotten switch, one missed checklist item, and an entire plane full of people dies. No mechanical failure, no bad weather, no terrorism, just human error. A simple, preventable mistake that killed 121 people. Andreas Prodromou became a tragic hero. He wasn't supposed to be in that cockpit. He was a flight attendant, but he had pilot training. He knew something was catastrophically wrong, and while everyone else was dying around him, he fought. He found oxygen. he stayed conscious longer than anyone else. He made it to the cockpit. He tried to save the plane. If there had been just a little more fuel, if he'd gotten there 5 minutes earlier, maybe he could have descended the plane. Maybe he could have saved everyone. But he ran out of time. The fuel ran out, and he died trying. The Greek government investigated Helios Airways. They found systematic safety failures, poor maintenance procedures, inadequate pilot training. The airline was shut down 2 years later. The maintenance engineer who forgot to switch the pressurization system back to automatic was charged with manslaughter. So were several Helios executives. Some were convicted, some were acquitted, but no amount of legal proceedings could bring back the 121 people who died on that flight. No trial could erase the image of a Boeing 737 flying peacefully through the sky while everyone inside was already dead. A ghost plane, a flying tomb. The deadliest example of hypoxia in aviation history. And the most disturbing part, it could happen again. Right now, tomorrow. Any flight, if a pressurization system fails and pilots don't catch it immediately, everyone on board could be dead within minutes. Flying at 35,000 feet in a metal tube, completely dependent on machines to keep the air breathable. One malfunction, one oversight, one forgotten switch, and you're gone. That's the terrifying reality of modern aviation. We trust these systems completely. We trust the pilots. We trust the maintenance crews. But Helios, Flight 522 proved that sometimes trust isn't enough. Sometimes everything goes wrong in the worst possible way. And when it does, there's no escape. You're trapped at 34,000 feet, suffocating slowly, while the plane flies on autopilot toward oblivion. That's what happened to 121 people on August 14, 2005. They boarded a plane expecting a routine flight to Athens. Instead, they flew into the most horrifying death imaginable. Silent, invisible, inescapable. The ghost flight. The zombie plane. Helios Airways Flight 522.